England did not remember Jane Seymour for fiery speeches or political intrigue. She did not challenge the king, rewrite religion, or rule with spectacle. Yet her name would be whispered long after her death, because she gave England what no other queen could. In the 1530s, the Tudor dynasty stood on the edge of collapse. King Henry VIII had broken with Rome, executed a queen, and divided his kingdom, all for one purpose: a legitimate male heir. Without a son, England faced uncertainty, civil war, and the possible end of the Tudor line. The crown rested on fragile hopes and broken marriages. Then came Jane Seymour, quiet, obedient, pious. She moved carefully through a court still stained by the blood of Anne Boleyn. Where others had failed, Jane succeeded, not through ambition, but through survival. She gave Henry his long-awaited son, Prince Edward, securing the future of the Tudor dynasty at last. But victory came at a terrible cost. Jane Seymour would reign as queen for just 17 months. She would live only days after fulfilling her greatest duty. Loved by the king, mourned by the realm, and buried beside Henry himself, Jane's story is one of sacrifice, silence, and legacy. This is the story of Jane Seymour, the beloved wife who gave England an heir and lost her life in the process. England in the 1530s was a nation teetering on the edge of uncertainty. The Tudor dynasty, still young and fragile, faced a looming crisis: the absence of a legitimate male heir. Without a son to succeed Henry VIII, the very future of the kingdom hung in the balance. Foreign powers watched closely, while nobles jostled for influence, each maneuvering to secure their own place in the uncertain court. Religious tension added to the unrest. Henry's break from the Catholic Church, sparked by his desire to annul his marriage to Catherine of Aragon, had plunged the nation into controversy. The dissolution of monasteries and the reshaping of England's religious landscape left many anxious, while the king's new policies created factions, both loyal and opposed. Amid this turmoil, the people whispered about the king's desperation for a male heir. Each day without a son intensified fears of civil strife or dynastic collapse. The court itself was a powder keg of ambition and suspicion, where even a queen's life could be cut short if she failed to deliver the kingdom's salvation. Into this tense, fragile world would step a woman who, through quiet obedience and piety, would finally give England hope. A queen whose influence, though understated, would shape the nation's future. Henry VIII was consumed by one relentless desire: a legitimate male heir to secure the Tudor dynasty. Every thought, every action was measured against this singular goal. Without a son, the kingdom faced the threat of instability, rebellion, and civil war. For Henry, the future of England and his own legacy depended entirely on producing a boy. His first wife, Catherine of Aragon, had given him only a daughter, Mary, and the king's frustration festered over decades. His second wife, Anne Boleyn, bore another daughter, Elizabeth, and Henry's obsession deepened. The memory of failed marriages haunted him, each lost opportunity feeding both his anger and desperation. Court whispers and political tension surrounded him at all times. Every noble, advisor, and foreign envoy was acutely aware of Henry's urgency. Factions formed, alliances shifted, and intrigue thrived.
The king's obsession dictated court politics, enforcing loyalty through fear and favor. Even his closest advisors could feel the weight of his temper, knowing that success or failure in producing a son could change their fortunes overnight.
Into this atmosphere of urgency and desire stepped Jane Seymour. Her quiet presence, humility, and piety presented a contrast to previous queens. For the first time in years, Henry dared to hope that a woman could finally give him the heir he craved, shaping the destiny of England itself. Catherine of Aragon, Henry VIII's first wife, had ruled over the king's heart for decades. A devoted queen and deeply pious woman, she had borne him a daughter, Mary, but not the son he desperately craved. For years, her loyalty and virtue could not satisfy Henry's obsession, leaving their marriage strained under the weight of political and personal frustration. The court was never silent. Courtiers and advisors whispered behind closed doors, debating the king's desires and Catherine's diminishing influence. Some saw her steadfastness as noble, others as an obstacle to England's future. Rumors and tensions swirled like smoke through the halls of power, coloring every decision with suspicion and uncertainty. Into this charged environment entered Anne Boleyn, young, clever, and ambitious. Catherine's shadow lingered, yet Anne's presence demanded attention. The court split between loyalty to the queen and fascination with the new consort. The struggle for Henry's favor intensified as the king's obsession with a male heir grew more urgent with each passing day. Though Catherine would ultimately be set aside, her dignity and faith left a lasting impression. She shaped the king, the court, and England itself. Even in removal, her influence persisted, casting a shadow that would touch every corner of Henry's reign, setting the stage for the dramatic drama yet to unfold. Anne Boleyn entered Henry VIII's court like a spark in the tense Tudor atmosphere. Young, clever, and ambitious, she carried herself with confidence and poise, immediately capturing the king's attention. Her every gesture, from a subtle glance to a carefully timed smile, hinted at both charm and intellect, making her impossible to ignore in a court still reeling from previous scandals. The court quickly became a battlefield of whispers and intrigue. Some courtiers supported Anne's ascent, seeing opportunity in her wit and influence. Others remained loyal to Catherine of Aragon, or cautious of the king's obsession with producing a son. Factions formed and dissolved in secret corridors, each maneuver carefully calculated as the struggle for Henry's favor intensified. Henry VIII's fascination with Anne grew with each passing day. His attention shifted fully toward her, overshadowing Catherine's diminishing presence. Anne's cleverness and ambition, combined with her ability to navigate the dangerous currents of court politics, made her both beloved and feared. The stakes were clear. The king desired a male heir, and Anne might be the key to fulfilling that destiny. Anne's rise set the stage for a dramatic shift in England's history. Her influence over the king, her bold personality, and the court's divided loyalties created tension and anticipation. What began as flirtation and fascination soon became a story of ambition, intrigue, and the relentless pursuit of a son who would shape the future of the Tudor dynasty. Anne Boleyn, once the king's obsession, began to lose favor in Henry VIII's eyes. Her fiery spirit and ambition, which once charmed the court, now provoked suspicion. Rumors circulated about her behavior and loyalty, and whispers of scandal spread through the halls. The court's atmosphere grew tense as allies distanced themselves and opponents quietly plotted her downfall.
Court factions seized the opportunity to remove Anne. She faced accusations of adultery, treason, and plotting against the king, charges that would prove fatal in the dangerous Tudor court. Even those once loyal to her hesitated, knowing that defending her could jeopardize their own lives. The palace, once alive with intrigue, now echoed with the shadow of betrayal. Anne was confined to the Tower of London, her freedom stripped away. Within the stone walls, she faced not only her personal fear, but the crushing weight of political machinations. Courtiers whispered in corridors, and the kingdom waited anxiously, aware that even a queen could fall swiftly in Henry's court. Despite her tragic end, Anne's influence lingered. Her daughter, Elizabeth, would one day ascend the throne, reshaping England. The tale of Anne Boleyn serves as a stark reminder of ambition, power, and the perilous nature of Tudor politics. Her life, though cut short, left a lasting mark on history. The court was stunned. Anne Boleyn's fall had been swift and brutal, and now the halls echoed with whispers of her tragic end. Courtiers moved cautiously, aware that the king's favor could shift at any moment. Grief and fear intermingled as the reality sank in. Even a queen could be brought low in Henry VIII's turbulent court. The kingdom mourned quietly. Those loyal to Anne remembered her intelligence, wit, and ambition. Candles flickered in the dim halls, casting soft shadows on tapestries and stone walls. Even in her absence, her presence was felt, leaving a lingering sense of loss and reflection on the fleeting nature of power and life within the Tudor court. Survivors of the court grew cautious. Alliances shifted, and no one dared act openly against the king or his new obsessions. Every gesture, every word was measured carefully. Fear became a constant companion, reminding courtiers that favor could vanish overnight, and that their positions and even lives hung by a thread. Amid mourning and fear, the stage was set for the next queen. The court awaited a new presence, someone who could capture the king's favor, restore stability, and provide the long-desired male heir. The shadow of Anne Boleyn lingered, but the kingdom's attention slowly turned toward the woman who would follow in her place. Into the turbulent Tudor court stepped Jane Seymour, a young woman of quiet dignity and modesty. Unlike her predecessors, she carried no airs of ambition or intrigue. Her calm demeanor and pious nature immediately distinguished her from the fiery personalities that had surrounded Henry VIII. Courtiers noticed her restraint, whispering among themselves about the new presence, whose serenity seemed to contrast with the tension and chaos of the court. Henry VIII, ever restless in his pursuit of a male heir, took notice of Jane's gentle manners and humility. She spoke with soft confidence, always respectful yet intelligent, showing a combination of obedience and subtle poise. The king, fascinated by her quiet grace, began to favor her over other ladies of the court, intrigued by the sense of calm she brought to a palace long filled with ambition, scandal, and intrigue. Courtiers quickly observed the king's growing attention. Some saw Jane as an opportunity to restore stability, while others remained cautious, aware of the dangers of favor in Henry's court. Whispers and speculation spread quietly through the halls as nobles and advisors began recalculating alliances in anticipation of a new queen. Jane's presence marked the beginning of a turning point in England's history. Her modesty, faith, and obedience offered Henry hope for the long-desired male heir. Amid tension, scandal, and political maneuvering, Jane Seymour quietly emerged as a figure who could finally bring peace, favor, and continuity to the Tudor dynasty. Jane Seymour came from the Seymour family, a respected but modest noble house in Wiltshire. Her upbringing emphasized piety, education, and decorum, shaping her into a woman of quiet dignity and moral steadiness. Though not as ambitious or politically savvy as Anne Boleyn, Jane's family instilled in her the virtues that would later capture Henry VIII's favor: loyalty, humility, and discretion. The Seymours were well connected, with brothers and relatives serving in key positions at court. Their presence provided Jane with support and influence, quietly reinforcing her position without drawing undue attention. The family's reputation for loyalty and service made Jane a safe and appealing choice for the king, especially after the scandal and tension surrounding previous queens. Jane's siblings, particularly her brothers Edward and Thomas, were ambitious yet careful, understanding the delicate balance required to navigate Henry VIII's court. Their guidance and subtle maneuvering ensured that Jane maintained favor while avoiding the pitfalls that had undone Anne Boleyn and Catherine of Aragon. Family loyalty became her shield amid political intrigue. The Seymour family's rise was inseparable from Jane's marriage to Henry VIII. Their influence expanded across the kingdom, and through Jane, the family would secure its legacy with the birth of Prince Edward. Though Jane's life was brief, the Seymour name became entwined with the Tudor dynasty for generations to come. Jane Seymour was known for her humility and devotion. Unlike the flamboyant Anne Boleyn, Jane carried herself with quiet dignity, embodying the piety and moral steadiness prized in Tudor England. Her calm and respectful demeanor made her approachable and admired by courtiers and common folk alike. Even in the turbulent court of Henry VIII, her virtues stood out, offering a contrast to the intrigue and ambition that surrounded her. Jane's personality was marked by a gentle intelligence. She observed the court with care, understanding the delicate balance of influence and caution. She did not seek attention or favor through ostentation, but rather through her sincerity, kindness, and quiet insight. These qualities allowed her to navigate the complexities of the Tudor court without provoking envy or hostility, earning respect from those who valued discretion and wisdom. Loyalty defined Jane's character. She supported her family while maintaining a measured presence at court, always mindful of her position. Her dedication extended to Henry VIII, whose favor she earned not by intrigue, but through obedience and empathy. Her loyalty and temperance made her a stabilizing force in a palace long plagued by scandal and rivalry. Though her life was brief, Jane Seymour left a lasting impression on history. Her virtues, her calm strength, and her capacity to bring peace to a tumultuous court earned her the king's favor and ultimately shaped the legacy of the Tudor dynasty through her son, Edward. Jane Seymour's arrival in Henry VIII's court brought a deliberate contrast to the flamboyance and ambition of her predecessors. Where Anne Boleyn had been fiery and outspoken, Jane was modest, quiet, and composed, embodying humility and piety. Her presence immediately introduced a sense of calm into a palace long marked by intrigue and scandal, offering both the king and the court a breath of serenity. Though reserved, Jane wielded influence quietly. She observed the court with patience and care, speaking only when necessary, yet her words carried weight. Courtiers noted her wisdom and tact, recognizing that her gentle approach allowed her to navigate courtly politics without provoking envy or hostility. In this way, Jane's subtlety became her greatest strength. Compared to Anne's boldness and Catherine's steadfast resistance, Jane's demeanor created a stark contrast. She was the antithesis of scandal and flamboyance, demonstrating that quiet virtue and discretion could command the king's favor just as effectively as ambition or charm. Her presence reshaped the atmosphere of the court, emphasizing order and moderation. This deliberate contrast was more than personality, it was destiny. Jane's humility, composure, and pious nature positioned her as the queen most likely to fulfill Henry's longing for a male heir. Her approach would influence the court and set the stage for the stability and continuity the Tudor dynasty so desperately sought. Jane Seymour entered the Tudor court with a calm and unassuming presence. Unlike the bold and ambitious queens before her, she moved with grace and humility, immediately standing out for her modesty. Courtiers whispered softly among themselves, noticing how her quiet demeanor contrasted sharply with the lively, sometimes scandalous energy that had dominated Henry VIII's palace. Henry VIII, restless and ever watchful for qualities in a queen, could not help but notice Jane. There was something about her gentle manners, composed posture, and serene expression that drew his attention. Unlike Anne Boleyn's fiery charm or Catherine of Aragon's steadfastness, Jane radiated calm and piety, qualities that intrigued a king obsessed with stability and the prospect of a male heir. Jane's intelligence and observation were quiet but evident. She responded to the king and courtiers with politeness and respect, never overstepping, yet her subtle confidence left an impression. The court began to sense that this young woman might hold influence in ways that were gentle but undeniable, capable of navigating the dangerous intricacies of Henry's favor. This moment marked the start of Jane Seymour's ascent. Through humility, piety, and quiet dignity, she captured Henry VIII's attention. In doing so, she set the stage for a reign defined not by scandal or intrigue, but by steadiness, hope, and the promise of a long-desired male heir. As Jane Seymour spent more time at court, Henry VIII's attention became increasingly evident. Courtiers observed the subtle interactions, noting her calm demeanor and respectful manners. Unlike the flamboyant Anne Boleyn, Jane's quiet grace did not demand the spotlight, yet it drew the king's gaze naturally. Every gesture, every careful word was measured, revealing a woman aware of both her influence and the scrutiny around her. In the grand halls of the palace, Henry found himself watching Jane more closely. A shared glance here, a polite conversation there. Small exchanges became significant. Jane's gentle intelligence and serene confidence impressed the king, setting her apart from other ladies of the court. Courtiers whispered quietly, aware that these subtle moments hinted at a growing bond, though all interactions remained proper and restrained. While the king's favor grew, the court itself remained tense. Advisors and nobles speculated on Jane's intentions and the implications for the succession. Alliances shifted, and whispers of opportunity and caution spread quietly among the courtiers. Jane, mindful of the delicate balance, navigated these waters with discretion, her modesty and dignity earning respect without drawing envy. Henry VIII's interest in Jane marked the start of a slow, careful courtship. Her humility, poise, and piety captured his admiration, offering a sense of stability and calm within the often turbulent Tudor court. This restrained beginning laid the foundation for a relationship that would ultimately change the course of English history. Jane Seymour, though calm and obedient by nature, showed a quiet strength when faced with a delicate situation. When approached with advances that could compromise her integrity or courtly reputation, she refused politely but firmly. Her refusal was measured, respectful, yet unwavering, demonstrating that humility and piety could coexist with courage. This act quietly impressed both the king and the court. In the grandeur of the Tudor palace, Jane stood composed. Her posture was upright, her hands folded lightly, and her gaze calm. She spoke carefully, mindful of words and tone, conveying her message without offense. Courtiers noticed her restraint and discretion, understanding that she had navigated a delicate situation with grace and poise, preserving both her dignity and reputation.
Whispers rippled through the halls. Some courtiers admired her courage, while others marveled at her ability to remain unshaken under scrutiny. Even Henry VIII seemed intrigued by her quiet resolve, recognizing that her integrity set her apart from previous queens who had succumbed to ambition or courtly pressure.
Jane's refusal was more than an act of personal virtue. It marked the beginning of her lasting favor. Her measured courage and unwavering morality earned respect and admiration, laying the foundation for her eventual rise as the king's trusted and beloved queen. The Tudor court buzzed quietly with anticipation as Jane Seymour's favor with Henry VIII grew. Courtiers whispered about the king's interest in this calm, pious lady, noting her modesty and grace. The palace seemed to hold its breath, aware that a decision was approaching that could reshape the succession and the atmosphere of the court. Jane moved with measured composure, her dignity unshaken by the scrutiny around her. Preparations for a swift marriage were set in motion. Jewelers polished ornaments, tailors adjusted gowns, and the chapel was readied for the royal ceremony. Jane maintained her serenity, attending to her duties quietly, embodying humility and poise. Every detail reflected the importance of the occasion, and the court watched closely, knowing that this marriage could bring stability after years of scandal and intrigue. On the day of the union, Jane and Henry stood before the chapel altar. The atmosphere was solemn yet reverent, candles flickering softly against stone walls. Jane's modest Tudor gown and gable hood reflected her piety, while Henry's crimson and gold attire symbolized the power and continuity of the monarchy. Courtiers observed in respectful silence, aware of the historic significance of the moment. Jane Seymour became queen. Her quiet strength and pious demeanor promised a new era of stability for Henry VIII's court. The swift marriage was more than a union of two individuals. It was a turning point in Tudor history, setting the stage for the long-desired male heir and the continued legacy of the monarchy. Word of Jane Seymour's marriage to Henry VIII spread quickly through the court and across England. Courtiers whispered with curiosity and speculation, noting her calm demeanor and modest presence. Among the nobility, opinions varied. Some admired her humility and piety, while others quietly wondered how she would navigate the complex politics of Henry's court. Outside the palace, news traveled to towns and villages. People spoke of the new queen with a mixture of hope and caution. Jane's reputation for grace and virtue preceded her, offering reassurance after the scandalous reign of her predecessor. In quiet homes and bustling marketplaces, England's subjects felt a sense of optimism, anticipating stability and continuity for the monarchy. Within the palace, courtiers carefully adjusted to Jane's presence. Alliances shifted subtly as nobles sought favor with the new queen. Jane's composed and humble demeanor disarmed rivals and earned respect, while Henry's favor made her influence in the court quietly undeniable. The atmosphere was one of cautious admiration and measured acceptance. Jane's rise was not just a personal triumph, it marked a pivotal moment for England. Her demeanor, poise, and piety offered a vision of hope and stability. The country watched closely, sensing that this quiet, dignified queen could shape the future of the Tudor dynasty and the realm itself. As queen consort, Jane Seymour presented a striking contrast to those who came before her. She avoided extravagance and political display, choosing instead a quiet dignity that suited her nature. Her movements were measured, her words careful, and her presence calm. In a court accustomed to drama and rivalry, Jane's restraint stood out as both unusual and refreshing. Jane fulfilled her duties with humility and order. She presided over her household efficiently, encouraged reconciliation where possible, and avoided involvement in factional disputes. Her influence was subtle rather than forceful. Courtiers learned quickly that access to the queen meant respect, patience, and restraint, reflecting the values she quietly embodied. Henry VIII appeared genuinely pleased with Jane's obedience and gentle nature. She soothed his temper and reinforced his sense of authority, rarely challenging him openly. Her role was not to dominate the court, but to stabilize it, offering the king a sense of peace after years of turmoil and controversy. Jane's queenship was marked not by spectacle, but by serenity. Though her reign would be brief, her conduct as queen consort laid the foundation for her lasting reputation, one of modesty, loyalty, and quiet strength within the heart of Tudor power. As queen, Jane Seymour embraced a role few before her had managed successfully, that of reconciliation. She believed harmony was stronger than rivalry, and quietly sought to ease the tensions that divided Henry VIII's court. Rather than issuing commands, she listened. Her calm presence softened hardened attitudes, and her gentle manner allowed voices long silenced to be heard again. Jane worked carefully to repair fractured relationships, particularly within the royal family. She showed compassion toward Henry's daughters, Mary and Elizabeth, treating them with respect and kindness. Through patience and humility, Jane encouraged their gradual return to favor, offering hope that the family might one day be united despite past betrayals and sorrow. Though respected, Jane's influence had limits. When she pleaded for mercy during times of unrest, Henry reminded her that obedience was expected, not intervention. Jane withdrew without protest, understanding the dangers of overstepping. Her power lay not in confrontation, but in quiet persistence and moral example.
Jane's efforts did not reshape policy, but they reshaped hearts. Her queenship became associated with peace, compassion, and restraint. In a court marked by ambition and fear, Jane Seymour stood as a rare symbol of reconciliation, gentle, dignified, and remembered for healing rather than division.
For years, Princess Mary had lived in uncertainty, pushed aside by politics and stripped of her former status. Jane Seymour understood the sensitivity of Mary's position and approached the matter with caution. She knew that reconciliation required patience, humility, and careful timing. Quietly, Jane began to advocate for healing rather than punishment. Without challenging Henry VIII openly, Jane encouraged mercy through gentle suggestion. She spoke of family, legacy, and forgiveness, framing her words in loyalty rather than defiance. Her calm persistence softened the king's resistance. Slowly, doors once closed to Mary began to open, and her path back to court became possible. Princess Mary returned to court with guarded dignity. Though cautious, she was treated with renewed respect. Jane welcomed her warmly, offering kindness rather than judgment. Courtiers observed the moment with restrained emotion, aware that this reunion marked a rare act of compassion within a court often ruled by fear.
Mary's return did not erase the pain of the past, but it restored a measure of humanity to the royal household. Jane's quiet influence achieved what force could not. In reuniting a fractured family, she strengthened the image of the monarchy and secured her legacy as a queen who chose reconciliation over division. England remained deeply divided by religious change. The break from Rome had unsettled the nation, leaving uncertainty in churches, monasteries, and households alike. Old beliefs clashed with new doctrines, and fear spread quietly as people struggled to understand what faith now meant under the king's authority. The air was heavy with doubt and tension. Jane Seymour was personally devout and inclined toward traditional Catholic practices. She valued prayer, charity, and religious continuity, finding comfort in familiar rituals. Yet, as queen, she understood the danger of openly opposing reform. Her faith was practiced privately, carefully balanced between personal belief and political survival. Jane avoided public involvement in religious debate. She neither promoted reform nor openly resisted it, choosing silence over provocation. This restraint protected her position, but came at a personal cost. In a court shaped by ideological conflict, even quiet devotion carried risk. Jane's response to religious turmoil reflected her character, measured, cautious, and deeply sincere. While England wrestled with spiritual identity, she remained steady, offering an example of humility and restraint. Her faith did not shape policy, but it shaped her legacy as a queen who endured division with dignity. For much of her queenship, Jane Seymour ruled through silence and restraint. But there came a moment when her conscience would not allow her to remain quiet. Faced with growing unrest and suffering among the people, Jane felt compelled to speak. This decision marked a rare departure from her usual caution, revealing a deeper resolve beneath her gentle exterior. Jane approached Henry VIII with humility, choosing her words carefully. She spoke not as a rival or reformer, but as a loyal wife concerned for justice and mercy. Her plea was calm and respectful, grounded in compassion rather than defiance. She hoped her position as queen might soften the king's response to the troubles unfolding across the realm. Henry listened, but his reaction was swift and firm. He reminded Jane of the fate of queens who had interfered in matters of state. The warning was unmistakable. Jane withdrew immediately, understanding the danger of pressing further. Her moment of courage ended not in victory, but in silence.
Though her plea failed, Jane's action revealed her moral strength. She chose conscience over comfort, even briefly. That quiet act of bravery became part of her legacy, a queen who dared to speak, then lived to endure, preserving her life and dignity within a dangerous court.
The court grew still as the king's eyes fixed on the queen. Though she had acted with humility and care, her earlier words had stirred unease. Courtiers shifted nervously, sensing that even a small misstep could have grave consequences. The air seemed heavier, filled with unspoken warnings, as everyone waited for the king's response. With measured authority, the king addressed his queen. His voice was firm, but not cruel, reminding her of the delicate balance she had to maintain in court. He spoke of the dangers that had befallen those who overstepped boundaries, and the need for obedience to preserve her position. Every word carried weight, leaving no room for misinterpretation. The queen absorbed the warning with quiet composure. She lowered her eyes slightly, acknowledging the king's authority without fear or defiance. Though constrained, her expression revealed inner strength and wisdom, a careful calculation to maintain her dignity while preserving her life in a court full of intrigue. After the warning, a tense silence settled over the chamber. The courtiers breathed softly, and life within the palace slowly resumed its rhythm. The queen stood quietly, composed and unshaken, a testament to her resilience and prudence in the face of power. The queen's days grew quieter as she withdrew into herself. Court life continued around her, bustling and loud, but Jane moved with measured calm, speaking only when necessary. Her silence was not weakness, it was a shield, a deliberate choice to navigate a court full of suspicion, ambition, and danger. Every step she took was cautious, every word weighed. From the privacy of her chambers or behind curtained windows, Jane observed the intricacies of court politics. She watched alliances shift, whispers travel, and the ambitions of nobles unfold. Her silence allowed her to understand the subtle patterns of power, gaining insight without drawing attention to herself. In this restraint, she preserved both safety and influence. Alone in quiet moments, Jane reflected on her role as queen. She balanced duty, conscience, and survival, knowing that words spoken at the wrong time could bring ruin. Prayer and contemplation became her companions, giving her strength and clarity. Her silence was a form of wisdom, an act of endurance in an unpredictable court. Though she rarely spoke, Jane's presence was felt. Her calm demeanor, dignity, and composure commanded respect. In a court where voices could harm as much as heal, her silence became a powerful statement, one of prudence, moral strength, and quiet resilience. The queen moved through her days with a gentle grace, aware of the life growing within her. Each moment was filled with quiet anticipation, a mixture of hope and cautious anxiety. Courtiers whispered behind closed doors, sensing the significance of this pregnancy. Every glance, every gesture from the king and the court carried weight, as if the entire kingdom waited alongside her. Henry observed the queen with renewed interest and care. He sought her presence frequently, asking after her health and well-being. His demeanor was more tender than it had been in years, reflecting the fragile hope the court now shared. The queen, mindful of both pride and caution, accepted his attentions with quiet composure, aware of the delicate balance between favor and peril. Preparations for the future began subtly. Servants and attendants arranged chambers with care. Herbal remedies were prepared for the queen's comfort, and whispers of a potential heir spread through the palace. The atmosphere was one of reverent expectation, marked by both excitement and the underlying tension of uncertainty. Beyond the palace walls, the people sensed the promise of continuity for the monarchy. The queen's pregnancy became a symbol of hope and stability. Each day she carried the unborn child. She carried the future of the realm in her quiet strength, embodying the anticipation and aspirations of a kingdom yearning for an heir. The palace hummed with quiet tension. Servants moved carefully. Courtiers whispered behind closed doors, and the queen rested, aware that the moment of birth was near. Every detail was attended to, chambers prepared, herbs and remedies arranged, and attendants at the ready. The air was thick with both hope and fear, as the entire court sensed the weight of what was about to unfold. The queen remained calm, her hands resting lightly on her abdomen, breathing steadily. Despite the discomfort and uncertainty, she displayed a serene composure. She had carried the future of the monarchy within her for months, and now, with patience and courage, she faced the pivotal moment. Her dignity and quiet strength were a steadying force for those around her. Courtiers gathered in hushed anticipation outside her chamber. Some knelt in prayer, others whispered protective blessings, their expressions a mix of anxiety and hope. Even the king, usually stern and commanding, appeared subdued, aware that the kingdom's continuity depended on what was about to happen. Every heartbeat seemed amplified within the silent corridors. The palace and the realm beyond seemed to pause. Each day of the queen's pregnancy had been a symbol of promise. Now the people held their breath, united in expectation. The queen's courage, patience, and dignity mirrored the hopes of the nation, as all awaited the heir who would carry England's future. As the queen's time drew near, she withdrew from the court to a private chamber prepared for her confinement. Servants quietly adjusted the room, beds arranged, herbs and water placed, curtains drawn to create an intimate, protected space. The queen moved calmly, hands resting lightly on her abdomen, aware that the coming hours would change the course of the kingdom. The air was heavy with both anticipation and solemnity. A small group of trusted attendants waited silently, ready to support the queen. Their expressions reflected reverence, concern, and devotion. Each detail, linen folded, cushions at hand, and medicinal herbs nearby, was carefully attended to. The queen acknowledged their presence with a serene nod, her quiet composure reassuring them even as tension gripped the palace. Henry observed from a respectful distance, his usual authority tempered by anticipation. He paced in adjoining chambers, restless yet hopeful. Courtiers outside whispered in hushed tones, aware that the birth would determine the kingdom's future.
Even in the palace corridors, a palpable sense of tension and expectation filled the air. Within the chamber, the queen settled into stillness. She breathed steadily, focusing on patience and strength. The attendants waited with quiet vigilance, candles flickering softly against the stone walls. In this calm before the birth, the queen embodied both dignity and endurance, carrying the hopes of the monarchy and the nation within her.
The queen's labor began in the quiet hours of dawn. Her chamber was dimly lit by flickering candles, the soft light reflecting off stone walls and tapestries. Attendants moved silently, attending to her needs while maintaining an atmosphere of calm and reverence. Every breath she drew carried both pain and determination, her hands lightly resting on her abdomen as the first contractions signaled the long hours ahead.
Hours stretched on, and the queen endured with remarkable composure. Her face, flushed with exertion, revealed both discomfort and unwavering strength. Attendants whispered words of comfort, offered warm cloths and adjusted pillows, but all movement was measured and quiet. The chamber's stillness was punctuated only by the rhythm of her breathing, the flicker of candlelight, and the distant, hushed voices of those standing vigil. The king remained nearby, pacing in adjoining chambers, yet always mindful of the queen's privacy. His usual authority was tempered by worry and anticipation. Courtiers, too, waited quietly, aware that the moment would determine the kingdom's future. Outside the chamber, tension mingled with hope, every heartbeat echoing the gravity of the night. As labor continued, fleeting moments of relief came with each contraction eased. The queen's strength inspired those around her. Every hand on her, every whispered encouragement bore witness to patience, courage, and endurance. In the stillness of the chamber, the anticipation of new life filled the air, a promise of continuity for the monarchy and hope for the realm. In the quiet hours of the night, the queen's chamber was filled with anticipation. Candles flickered softly, casting warm light across stone walls and rich tapestries. The attendants moved with practiced care, guiding the queen through her final moments of labor. Each breath she drew carried both exhaustion and determination, knowing the weight of the kingdom rested on what was about to come. Hours of labor tested the queen's strength and endurance. Attendants whispered calm encouragements, adjusted bedding, and offered comfort with gentle hands. Her face showed effort and resilience, yet beneath the strain, her composure never wavered. Every movement, every breath was measured, a testament to her courage and unwavering resolve in the face of great responsibility. Finally, a cry pierced the stillness, the first sound of the newborn prince. Relief and joy swept quietly through the chamber. The attendants worked swiftly but carefully, ensuring both mother and child were safe. The queen, exhausted yet radiant, held the infant close, her serene composure mingling with tears of gratitude and pride. Word of the prince's birth spread through the palace corridors. Courtiers and servants offered whispered congratulations, their faces reflecting awe and relief. Though the celebration was restrained, the significance was immense. A new heir, a symbol of hope and continuity, cradled safely by a queen whose patience, courage, and endurance had secured the future of the realm. The news of the prince's birth traveled swiftly through the palace corridors. Courtiers whispered with awe, servants hurried quietly to spread the word, and attendants moved with discreet excitement. Even in the hushed grandeur of the Tudor halls, a sense of relief and joy permeated the air. The Queen, serene and dignified, remained in her chamber, holding the infant close, her calm composure embodying both endurance and triumph.
The king approached the queen, his usual stern demeanor softened by pride and relief. He observed the prince carefully, then looked at the queen with a rare tenderness. Their eyes met in quiet acknowledgement of the shared ordeal and the hope now resting in their child. Even within the palace's strict hierarchy, the moment felt intimate and deeply human, a private triumph amid public anticipation.
Word of the heir's arrival spread through the court. Courtiers and nobles offered hushed congratulations, kneeling in reverent respect, yet mindful of the solemnity of the moment. The palace was alive with soft music, muted cheers, and the subtle glow of candles, balancing joy with decorum. Every gesture, bow, and whisper reflected the importance of this new life for the realm.
Beyond the palace walls, news reached towns and villages. The birth symbolized continuity and hope for the nation. Flags were quietly raised, church bells tolled, and people offered prayers of gratitude. In this calm celebration, both palace and kingdom shared a moment of reverent joy, united in anticipation of a future guided by the newborn heir. The palace breathed with quiet reverence as Edward, the newborn prince, rested in his mother's arms. Candles flickered softly across the stone walls and rich tapestries, illuminating the small chamber with a warm golden glow. Attendants stood respectfully nearby, their expressions a mix of awe, relief, and devotion. The Queen, serene and composed, gazed at her child, recognizing in him the hopes and future of the monarchy. Henry approached quietly, his usual stern presence softened by the weight of joy and relief. He observed his son carefully, then glanced at the Queen, sharing a silent acknowledgement of their shared endurance. The chamber, though small and intimate, carried the gravitas of history. This moment marked the continuation of the Tudor dynasty and the promise of stability for England. Outside the chamber, courtiers whispered in hushed tones, kneeling and offering discreet congratulations. Their faces reflected solemn joy and admiration for the Queen's courage. Even in celebration, decorum was observed, emphasizing reverence for both the mother and the heir. The palace was alive with quiet energy, a balance of hope and respect. The newborn prince slept peacefully in his mother's arms, a symbol of continuity for the realm. Candles flickered against the walls, and the attendants remained vigilant yet unobtrusive. In the stillness of the chamber, the legacy of the Tudor line felt assured, as England's hopes now rested in the tiny, precious figure of Edward, Prince of Wales. In the days following the birth, the Queen's strength began to fade. What first appeared as ordinary exhaustion slowly deepened into something more troubling. Her chamber remained quiet and dim, curtains drawn to soften the light as attendants watched her closely. Though she smiled faintly when holding her son, her face grew pale and her movements became increasingly weak. Physicians were summoned, their expressions grave as they examined the Queen. Remedies were prepared, herbs, poultices, and warm cloths, but relief did not come. Attendants moved carefully, whispering prayers as they tended to her. The air within the chamber shifted from celebration to concern, heavy with uncertainty and restrained fear. Henry remained near, his joy tempered by growing dread. He observed the Queen quietly, unwilling to voice the possibility forming in his mind. Courtiers sensed the change and spoke in hushed tones beyond the chamber doors. The birth of an heir had secured the future, yet the present felt fragile and uncertain. Henry remained near, his joy tempered by growing dread. He observed the Queen quietly, unwilling to voice the possibility forming in his mind. Courtiers sensed the change and spoke in hushed tones beyond the chamber doors. The birth of an heir had secured the future, yet the present felt fragile and uncertain. Only days after the birth of the long-awaited heir, the Queen's condition worsened. What had begun as weakness now revealed itself as fever. Her skin burned, her breathing grew shallow, and the calm of the chamber shifted into quiet alarm. Attendants moved with increased care, lowering their voices as if sound itself might disturb her fragile state. Physicians worked methodically, offering the best treatments known to their age. Herbal infusions were prepared, clothes cooled and replaced, prayers murmured beneath steady breaths. Yet the fever refused to break. The limits of Tudor medicine became painfully clear as hope and fear coexisted within the dimly lit room. Beyond the Queen's chamber, the palace fell into a tense stillness. Celebration faded into restraint. Courtiers avoided eye contact. Servants moved softly along stone corridors, and the king waited in uneasy quiet. The birth of a prince had secured the future, but the present now trembled under uncertainty. Through the pain and fever, the Queen remained composed when consciousness allowed. She spoke little, conserving strength, her thoughts turning often to her child. Even as illness tightened its grip, she endured with dignity, unaware that history would remember her not only as a queen, but as a mother whose sacrifice shaped the fate of England. As the days passed, the Queen's strength diminished further. Her movements grew slower, her voice softer, until even simple gestures required effort. The chamber remained hushed, candles burning low as attendants moved with deliberate care. Outside the curtained windows, daylight came and went, unnoticed by those gathered within. The sense of time blurred as concern replaced all other thoughts. At times, the Queen stirred and opened her eyes, her gaze calm though distant. She listened more than she spoke, conserving what little strength remained. When consciousness allowed, she asked quietly about her son, reassured only when told he was well. These brief moments of awareness were cherished, fragile pauses amid growing uncertainty. Attendants maintained constant watch, their prayers whispered beneath steady breaths. Physicians stood back now, their remedies exhausted. In the corridors beyond, the palace seemed to hold its breath. The king remained nearby, silent and restrained, unwilling to leave, yet unable to change what was unfolding. As night settled once more, the Queen lay still, her breathing shallow and slow. The room was filled with solemn stillness. Though the heir lived and the dynasty endured, the cost had become clear. Jane Seymour, gentle and devoted, faded quietly, her legacy secured not through ambition but through sacrifice. As night settles over the palace,
Jane Seymour's chamber grows heavy with silence. The candles burn low, their flames trembling against the stone walls. Her breathing is shallow now, each breath drawn with visible effort. Physicians whisper among themselves, their faces grave, knowing their remedies have failed. Outside the chamber, footsteps fade, and the palace seems to hold its breath. Jane lies still, her face pale but peaceful. The crown that once symbolized triumph feels distant now. She is no longer queen in power, but a mother who has given everything. Her thoughts drift toward her newborn son, the future of England, even as her strength slips away. No fanfare marks this moment, only quiet devotion and fading light. In the early hours of the morning, her breathing stops. There is no cry, no sudden movement, only stillness. An attendant gently closes her eyes. Jane Seymour, the queen who gave Henry VIII his long-awaited heir, has died at just 28 years old. The chamber becomes a place of reverence and loss. Word spreads softly through the palace. Bells toll, draped in mourning. Though her reign was brief, Jane's legacy is profound. She would be remembered not for ambition or intrigue, but for sacrifice. In death, she becomes Henry VIII's most cherished wife, and England's quiet, tragic queen. In the quiet of the morning, Henry VIII walked the cold, echoing corridors of his palace. The banners of mourning hung heavy along the stone walls. His steps were slow, measured, as if the weight of grief physically pressed upon him. Courtiers avoided his gaze, their whispers subdued. The king's usual authority felt muted, replaced by a rare vulnerability, a man mourning the woman who had given him his heir. Henry entered a secluded chamber, a place where he often sought solitude. His gaze fell upon a portrait of Jane Seymour, the queen whose life had ended far too soon. Memories of her composure, strength, and maternal devotion filled him. He rested his hands on the table, knuckles white, and allowed a rare sigh to escape. The palace seemed to hold its breath, honoring his private sorrow. Attendants placed candles along the chamber walls, their flames flickering like soft echoes of the Queen's presence. Henry knelt briefly, bowing his head, whispering a silent prayer. The moment was intimate, solemn, and unobserved by anyone outside these walls. Here, grief was personal, restrained, and reverent. Even in mourning, Henry understood the weight of his responsibilities. The heir slept safely, the Tudor line secured, yet the loss of Jane Seymour lingered. His grief was a quiet companion, a reminder that even kings were human, and that love and loss could coexist with duty. The palace and chapel were draped in black mourning cloth. Candles flickered along the stone walls, casting solemn shadows across the tapestries and wooden beams. Attendants and priests moved carefully, laying out ceremonial items, incense, and holy texts. The coffin rested on a raised platform, draped with a richly embroidered cover, its presence silent yet commanding. The air was heavy with reverence, anticipation, and quiet sorrow. Courtiers, nobles, and attendants entered the chapel in subdued tones, their faces solemn. Each knelt or bowed in quiet acknowledgement of the Queen's life and sacrifice. The king, dressed in deep crimson mourning robes, stood apart, his posture rigid but face reflecting restrained grief. The chapel, though grand, felt intimate through its hushed atmosphere.
Incense rose in curling streams as priests chanted softly. Candles flickered against stone walls, illuminating faces etched with respect and sorrow. The coffin was gently lowered into place, and prayers were whispered, honoring the Queen's devotion to crown, country, and child. The ceremony was deliberate and restrained, every gesture measured, emphasizing solemnity over spectacle.
Outside, the palace and city were touched by quiet grief. Flags hung at half-mast, and the toll of distant bells echoed across London. Though Jane Seymour's reign had been brief, her memory endured as a mother, a queen, and a figure whose life and death shaped the future of England. Weeks after Jane Seymour's death, the palace remained quiet, touched by her absence. Courtiers spoke of her gentle demeanor, her calm composure, and the warmth she had brought to court. Even in death, her memory lingered in the halls, in the flickering candlelight across tapestries and stone walls. Her life, though brief, had left an enduring mark on all who had known her.
Henry VIII spent long hours in contemplation, often in the chamber where she had rested. Portraits and personal items reminded him of her strength and devotion. He remembered her as a wife who had borne him the heir, a queen whose quiet dignity had softened the tumult of the court. In private moments, he spoke her name softly, acknowledging the love and respect that had endured beyond her passing. The court continued to honor Jane's memory with subtle tributes, prayers whispered in chapels, candles lit for her soul, and the careful observance of mourning rituals. Her grace and loyalty were remembered not through grand displays, but through quiet, solemn acts of remembrance. Jane Seymour became a symbol of devotion and sacrifice, the beloved wife who gave England its long-awaited heir. Though her time as queen was short, her influence endured, remembered as a gentle, steadfast presence whose life shaped the course of Tudor history. Among Henry VIII's 6 wives, Jane Seymour stood apart. Unlike those before her, she did not dominate court politics or provoke controversy. Her reign was marked by restraint, humility, and careful obedience. Where others had challenged the king's authority, Jane sought harmony, presenting herself as a stabilizing presence during a turbulent era. Catherine of Aragon had been steadfast and defiant, holding firmly to her title and faith. Anne Boleyn was ambitious, outspoken, and deeply entangled in political reform. Jane, by contrast, avoided factional struggles. She listened more than she spoke, intervened rarely, and chose silence over confrontation, a strategy that earned Henry's trust. Henry admired Jane's gentleness and devotion. She embodied the traditional virtues he increasingly desired: obedience, modesty, and maternal promise. Her success lay not in influence, but in reassurance. By fulfilling the role Henry envisioned for a queen, she secured both his affection and his lasting respect. After her death, Jane's reputation remained untarnished. Remembered as the wife who gave England its heir, she became the standard by which Henry judged his later marriages. In memory, she remained the queen who never disappointed him. From his earliest days, Prince Edward was treated as a treasure of the realm. Nurses, tutors, and attendants surrounded him with careful devotion. His chambers were kept warm and quiet, designed to protect the fragile life that represented England's future.
Though his mother was gone, her presence lingered in the reverence with which the child was raised. Edward grew, his days were shaped by learning and routine. Tutors instructed him in scripture, languages, and royal duty. He was taught to read early, to pray often, and to understand the weight of the crown he would one day wear. Discipline was firm but measured, reflecting the seriousness of his destiny. Henry VIII watched his son closely, visiting often, observing each sign of strength and intelligence. In Edward, Henry saw fulfillment, the continuation of the Tudor line. Though not a tender father, his pride was unmistakable, and the boy's progress was reported with great care throughout the court. Though Edward never truly knew his mother, Jane Seymour shaped his life through memory. She was spoken of with respect and gentleness, her sacrifice woven into the story of his birth. In this way, Jane remained present, guiding England's future through her son. After Jane Seymour's passing, Henry VIII was never the same. The court sensed a shift in the king's spirit. Though England now had an heir, the warmth Jane had brought to his life was gone. The palace moved forward, but grief lingered beneath ceremony and duty. Jane's memory quietly set a standard no future queen would fully meet. Henry's later marriages were driven less by affection and more by politics and survival. Alliances, diplomacy, and succession shaped his choices. Each new queen entered a court heavy with expectation and comparison, stepping into a role defined by Jane's success and sacrifice. Love became secondary to strategy. As the years passed, Henry grew harsher and more impatient. Illness and power hardened his temperament. The gentleness he once admired seemed distant, replaced by suspicion and control. His later marriages reflected this change, brief, strained, and often marked by conflict rather than harmony. Through every later union, Jane Seymour remained a silent presence in Henry's mind. She was buried beside him by his own command, the only wife granted that honor. In death, as in life, Jane endured as the queen who fulfilled his deepest desire and left an unbroken legacy. Before Jane Seymour became queen, her family held only modest influence at court. They were respected members of the gentry, loyal to the crown, but far from the center of power. Jane's marriage to Henry VIII changed their fortunes overnight, drawing the Seymour name into the heart of Tudor politics. With Jane as queen, her brothers Edward and Thomas Seymour rose swiftly. Titles, lands, and offices followed. Edward Seymour, measured and ambitious, became a trusted figure in government, while Thomas pursued favor through charm and confidence. Their ascent was careful at first, shaped by Jane's gentle guidance and her desire to avoid excess. Even after Jane's passing, the Seymour family continued to rise. Henry's affection for his late wife cast a protective shadow over her kin. Edward Seymour gained increasing authority, his influence expanding as Prince Edward grew, positioning the family close to the future of England. The Seymour rise was both opportunity and burden. Their fortunes were tied to the young prince and the memory of a beloved queen. As power grew, so did expectation, setting the stage for ambition, rivalry, and the fragile balance between loyalty and authority in Tudor England. When Henry VIII died in 1547, England entered a moment of profound transition. The bells tolled across the kingdom, announcing the end of a powerful and turbulent reign. In the stillness that followed, the future of the Tudor dynasty rested upon a child. Jane Seymour's son, only 9 years old, was now king. Edward VI was brought forward with great care and ceremony. Draped in royal garments too heavy for his small frame, he stood beneath the weight of expectation. Nobles knelt, oaths were sworn, and the crown passed gently onto his head. Though young, Edward carried the hopes of a nation shaped by his mother's sacrifice. Because of Edward's age, power rested not in his hands, but in those who governed for him. His uncle, Edward Seymour, emerged as Lord Protector, guiding the realm in the king's name. Decisions were made in council chambers, shaping England's future, while the young king observed and learned. In Edward's ascension, Jane Seymour's legacy reached its fullest expression. She had given England not just an heir, but a king. Though she was long gone, her place in history was secured the moment her son took the throne.
Edward VI's reign began with hope and anticipation. Though just a boy, he embodied the future of the Tudor dynasty. Courtiers and commoners alike watched with quiet reverence, aware that the kingdom's stability rested on his shoulders. His youth symbolized continuity, a living connection to his mother, Jane Seymour, and the royal line she had secured.
Because of his age, Edward relied entirely on his uncle, Edward Seymour, as Lord Protector. The Protector governed with firm authority, making decisions in the young king's name. Edward observed quietly, learning of governance, law, and the weight of the crown. His voice was often unheard, yet his presence symbolized both hope and vulnerability. Despite careful care, Edward's health was delicate. Fevers and weakness occasionally overtook him, reminding all that even a king was not immune to human frailty. The court moved cautiously, balancing the boy's well-being with the demands of leadership, and every action carried the weight of potential consequence. Edward VI's early death would mark a turning point in Tudor history, but his brief time on the throne reflected the enduring influence of his mother. Jane Seymour's legacy lived on through him, a reminder that even the shortest life could shape a kingdom's destiny. Edward VI's reign was marked with promise, but his health remained delicate. Fevers and illness struck repeatedly, and the kingdom watched with quiet apprehension. Every cough, every weak step reminded courtiers that the Tudor line, so carefully preserved by Jane Seymour, rested on a fragile child. The hope of continuity was shadowed by the inevitability of mortality. As Edward weakened, advisors and the Lord Protector moved with cautious precision. Laws were enacted, alliances maintained, and succession quietly debated. The boy king, aware of his own frailty, listened and observed, but the real power of shaping the realm lay in the hands of others. The court's silence reflected solemn concern rather than ceremony. When Edward VI died at just 15, grief swept through England. Bells tolled in towns and cities, and mourning drapes were hung in castles and palaces alike. The country mourned a king whose life had been brief, yet whose existence had defined hope and continuity for the Tudor dynasty. Though Edward's reign ended too soon, Jane Seymour's legacy endured. Through her son, she had shaped England's future and secured the Tudor succession. In memory and history, Jane remained the queen whose quiet strength and sacrifice had altered the course of a nation.
In his final years, Henry VIII's health deteriorated. He moved slowly through his palaces, heavy with illness and the weight of a lifetime of decisions. Courtiers watched silently, aware that the end of an era was near. The grandeur of the Tudor court could not mask the fragility of the once mighty king. Shadows fell across stone walls, reflecting the solemnity of approaching death.
Henry spent long hours alone, reflecting on his reign, his accomplishments, and his losses. His thoughts often turned to Jane Seymour, the wife who had given him his only male heir. Her memory, gentle and enduring, brought him a quiet comfort amid his declining years. Portraits of her and reminders of her life filled the private chambers with a subdued warmth. On his deathbed, Henry expressed a wish to be buried beside Jane Seymour. He commanded that no other wife would receive the honor of resting beside him. This decision spoke to the profound affection and respect he held for the Queen, whose life had shaped both his family and the nation. Henry VIII passed from the world, leaving a nation in mourning. Jane Seymour's influence endured, immortalized not only in her son, Edward VI, but also in the king's final act of devotion. Through this gesture, her memory remained forever intertwined with the Tudor legacy. Jane Seymour's influence extended far beyond her brief time as queen. She was remembered for her gentleness, her wisdom in navigating courtly life, and her devotion to duty. Even those who never met her felt the impact of her calm presence, and her example became a model for future queens. Her life demonstrated that power could be expressed quietly, with humility and care. Her most enduring legacy was her son, Edward VI. Through him, Jane shaped the course of English history. The boy king carried her bloodline and the hopes of the Tudor dynasty. Every action he took as ruler, every decision, reform, and ceremony was in part a reflection of the Queen who had given England its only male heir. Court and country alike remembered Jane with reverence. Portraits, memorials, and tombs ensured her presence endured even in death. Unlike other queens who stirred scandal or division, Jane was associated with stability, devotion, and maternal care, a quiet power that commanded respect. Jane Seymour's life may have been brief, but her impact was lasting. In history, she remains the queen who fulfilled the greatest Tudor hope, a symbol of maternal sacrifice, royal devotion, and the enduring strength of character. Jane Seymour's life, though brief, left a lasting imprint on England. She was a queen who embodied dignity, humility, and quiet strength. Her grace and devotion to duty set her apart in a court often marked by intrigue and conflict. Through her actions, she became an enduring example of how gentle influence could shape history. Her most tangible legacy lived on in Edward VI, the son she bore. Through him, her presence continued to guide the Tudor dynasty, even after her death. Every ceremony, every law, and every act of governance carried the imprint of the mother whose life had ensured England's continuity. History remembers Jane Seymour not for scandal or ambition, but for sacrifice and purpose. Portraits, tombs, and chronicles preserve her memory, reminding future generations of her unique role. She became a symbol of maternal devotion and the quiet power of influence, shaping both family and nation. In reflecting on Jane Seymour, we see the enduring impact of courage, humility, and love. Though her time was short, her legacy remains eternal, woven into the story of England and the Tudor dynasty she helped secure. Jane Seymour's life reminds us that true strength often speaks softly, yet echoes through history. If you enjoyed this journey through history, don't forget to subscribe for more fascinating stories, like to show your support, and share with friends who love history as much as you do.